Okay, so lovely to be here. Nice to see so many like-minded and interesting colleagues, and some familiar faces. So those of you who I haven't seen for a long time, it's really nice to reconnect here. For those who don't know me, I am Assistant Dean. My title is Assistant Dean for Clinical Communication at Li Kong School of Medicine. I'm currently Deputy Lead for the Medical Humanities course. I have a role in student wellbeing as well as Senior House Tutor for Mary Curie House. But I actually designed the student wellbeing processes at LKC Medicine. And slightly outside of my day job, but I think also relevant for the medical students and for this context. I'm a trained teacher in mindfulness and mindful self-compassion, including the self-compassion for healthcare communities adaptation. And I'm mentioning that even though it's not part of my role at medical school, but that's starting to become a real flavour that runs through the teaching. I often informally refer to myself as Assistant Dean for keeping them human, because I think that this combination of roles that I have kind of encompasses that sense of that being human in the role that they have as future doctors. And what I'd like to do today is to take you through the history of the Medical Humanities program at LKC Medicine. We're a new school, so it is quite a short history, and you'll see some familiar names popping up through there. I'll give you an overview of the curriculum as it stands at the moment, share some of the triumphs and bonuses, and as well as the things that have come out of it that have been intentional, some of the lovely things that have happened, which were additional bonuses, and then finally think about a little bit about how we're planning to move forward and what our next steps are. Okay, so I think a lot of people here are familiar with Li Kong School of Medicine, but for those who aren't, it's a new school. It's been collaboratively set up by Nanyang Technological University in Singapore and Imperial College London. It is a 5-year MBBS, and actually our students graduate with a joint degree from NTU and Imperial College, although it does not immediately qualify them to register with GMC and practice in the UK, but it is a joint degree from the two universities. We opened our doors to our first batch in August 2013, and this first cohort graduated in 2018. So this year we are graduating our 5th cohort of graduates. And our cohort size has increased over those years, our first batch being 54 students. Our intended steady state is 150. However, the last couple of years we have had larger cohorts in response to the pandemic and the difficulties that students face in accessing overseas education. So we've been asked to take larger numbers of students in the last couple of years. So our current Year 1 is 168 students. So in setting up the Medical Humanities teaching at LKC, this was some of the intent. And I mentioned this earlier in response to Ian's question. And the first thing is that this is something that is a core part of the curriculum that all of our students will experience. The medical humanities teaching. Of course, if we look at medical schools across the world, there's different approaches, and in some places it's optional or peripheral. So the intention was to make it core. And at the moment, we have embedded it in years 1 and 2. I think there was a conversation earlier about the challenges with undergraduate versus postgraduate. And of course, we also feel that, and even the preclinical versus clinical barrier is another one that is difficult to overcome. So at the moment, our teaching is in years 1 and 2. So how do we get going? So with it being a joint school with Imperial, we engaged our Imperial colleagues. So by the time we started working on this, I was already in Singapore. I'm actually from Imperial College myself, but I've been in Singapore now for 10 years. Giskin Day, who is probably still asleep, but I think will be on the call later this afternoon. Unless she's here, Giskin, apologies if I'm missing you on the list there. I can't see the list at the moment with my slide shared. But Giskin and Imperial was our contact at Imperial. As I said, the curriculum for the LKC was set up collaboratively with Imperial. So Giskin was a fantastic advisor in helping us get going, and actually one of the key events that helped us was Giskin visiting Singapore in 2012, and I was involved in helping to host that visit. And during that visit, we really planted the seed of what medical humanities would be at LKC Medicine, and that involved, kind of meeting with some key leads, both in the preclinical years and also meeting with clinicians to just, kind of get some context, get some interest going. And critically, we created in NTU a joint appointment, which would be an individual who would sit partly in the School of Humanities and partly in the School of Medicine. And that also may sound familiar because when we advertised that position, it was Harry who spoke before lunch, who took up that appointment jointly between the School of History and the School of Medicine, and was our lead for Medical Humanities for the first 2 years, I believe. Harry, if I've got my date wrong, then I apologise. And when Harry moved on, I'd been working very closely with Harry, and at the time, I think the way I described myself was not an expert in medical humanities, and I suppose as a teacher of mindfulness, I also really strongly link to that sense, the beginner's mind. So my description really is an enthusiastic amateur when it comes to medical humanities. So I picked up the reins at that point, and continued to deliver the course, making some kind of reworking some of the material. There was some of the material that was in Harry's curriculum that I really couldn't do justice to, was sort of beyond the scope of where I see my expertise. And as the lead for clinical communication and with an interest in student wellbeing, I reworked some of the materials to kind of sit within that that umbrella, which was a little bit more within my comfort zone. So that was for the next 2 years that I kind of kept things going and was the lead for the course during that time. And then after that point, that joint position was refilled, and Michael Stanley Baker came to join us at, and again sits partly within the School of Humanities and partly within the School of Medicine. And Michael and I co-teach the programme. And actually we haven't made so many changes since Michael's arrival, but I think that what has happened is maybe Michael brings a little bit more of the critical theory back that was beyond my expertise. And I think that, and Michael apologises for not being able to be here today. We wanted him to be included in this, but unfortunately he's not available as he's actually teaching today. So this is the key figures. So what I want to do now is really kind of take you through what our curriculum looks like at the moment. And as I said, the curriculum sits within years 1 and 2. We have 3 sessions that are each 3.5 hours long, so workshop style sessions within years 1 and 2. And on the left-hand side, you can see that the modules where the sessions sit. And what we really wanted to do was to map the content and the themes and the resources and examples that we bring to the session to what else it is the students are learning in the curriculum. So, so those students go through these various modules through their Year 1 and 2 program. And as I go through, Harry, you'll probably see some things that look familiar and some things that are slightly different. Okay, so just to take you through, I'm going to take you through session by session, and just talk a little bit about what the intention is of each session and some of the activities, and give you a flavour of what our students experience. So the first session in Year 1 is within the cardiorespiratory module. As students come into Medical Humanities, we talked a little bit about the barriers that they may feel earlier on, and we want to really name that. So actually we start with a hopes and fears exercise. So you can see there's images of the post-it notes that we start with, inviting students to let us know what is it they really want to get out of Medical Humanities, and what is it that they feel they're worried about or they feel is a barrier, and some of the barriers that come up are around, gosh, I haven't really thought about anything humanities for years. Our students come in, as we've discussed, with a very science background. They've either done A-level, they focused on sciences, and even if they've done IB, to get that second science, they've dropped either the creative or the humanities element from their international baccalaureate to get the sciences that are needed for our admissions process. So there's that lack of confidence and that distancing from humanities as subjects. So that's a barrier. I think one of the most common ones we see is I can't draw, because actually we pre-warn them that they're going to be doing some art in this first session. So they come in worried that we're going to grade them on their artistic ability. The focus of this first session, as I said, sits within cardiorespiratory. There are two topics that we look at. Firstly, as they are brand new medical students, and they've recently been through our white coat ceremony, we talk about the symbolism of the white coat and what it means to put on the white coat. And they often identify through some of these resources that putting on the white coat is like putting on a persona and almost hiding behind something. They kind of shift into a new version of themselves. So there's a sort of sense, already a theme coming up around professional identity formation, and the readiness to step into that future career in medicine, and some of them identify issues like imposter syndrome and things like that. And then the second thing that we look at, with it being within cardiorespiratory again, is around the heart, and the symbolism of the heart. The heart, it's a pump. It pumps blood around the body. But as a human being, what else does it mean? And the way this session is structured, the first 2 hours are spent, or 2.5 hours are spent exploring some of the resources. And in the last hour of the session, the invitation then is to produce a piece of art that expresses what does the heart mean. It is graded. We reassure the students that we're not grading them on their artistic ability. We're grading them on evidence of thought. So they do this piece of art and it comes with and they need to write an accompanying narrative. So just to give a little bit of a flavour, this is really one of the first examples of resources that we invite them to explore. The Song for Pythagoras and Danny Abzea, so the white coat, purple coat. The white coat, purple coat, a sleeve from both he sews, that white is always stained with blood, that purple by the rose. And phantom rose and blood most real compose a hybrid style. White coat and purple coat few men can reconcile. White coat and purple coat can each be worn in turn, but in the white man will freeze, and in the purple burn. It's purely coincidental that LKC's colour is purple, so actually this also gives a nice feel to the conversation. And when the students are invited to kind of think of what does this mean, they then start thinking about that sense of the objective scientific nature of medicine versus that the need for compassion and the sense of being overwhelmed by the emotions that might come up. And they identify also that putting on the white coat has this shift that I mentioned earlier. Other resources we explore are sort of history of transplantation, this sense of historically that it was not just physically impossible to operate on the heart, but actually taboo. And they hear stories from the perspective of a surgeon, from a writer, and from a patient about what heart transplantation means to them. So having explored all of these different areas, then the invitation to create a piece of art. And as I said, we reassure the students we are not grading them on their artistic ability. And some of the art we get is relatively simple. Some is a little bit more deep. And I'll just show you a couple of the prize winners. So we select a prize winner each year. So this was one of the prize winners, and actually, in terms of artistic, I think the students were quite surprised to see this was the prize winner. There were so many beautiful pieces of art, but what we really loved about this one was how it really brought into essence that sense of what is the poem White Coat, Purple Coat telling us, the Song of Pythagoras, and really demonstrated that. And the narrative also explained that. We really want the humanities to be not something the students find burdensome. So most of our sessions in the curriculum, the students have work they do outside of class, either pre-session materials for our team-based learning, and sometimes then coursework afterwards. But all of the resources we share with the students, we explore them together in class. There's no expectation they read ahead of time. And this art activity, they have an hour within class to, if they like, to complete it, submit it, draw a line under it, so it doesn't become a burden outside of class. But we do give them an additional week, so those that want to put more time to it can. And that gives this sense of choice, not to feel rushed to finish it in class, but also to have the option to finish it and not have it burden them later. It is very apparent that some students do spend a lot more time on it. This was another prize winner. I think this was last year's prize winner. And some of the pieces of art we receive are just beautiful. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to mark this. And whereas other coursework I'm involved in marking in, we kind of take our 168 students and we give like 30 pieces to several people to get through it quicker. With this heart art, both myself and Michael, both of us mark all pieces because we want to really celebrate the effort the students have put in, and to be able to just enjoy and respond to each of them. So this is, a beautiful piece of work. And one of the themes that often comes through in this session is this sense of the challenges of a career in medicine and this sense of the potential for burnout or distress, and that need to be able to manage some of the emotions that are that come up. I really liked the quote earlier, make sense of deep emotion, that came up in discussion earlier. I'm now going to share with you a piece of information. This is, I'm not going to give you the name, but this is new information. That this is the one we've just selected as this year's prize winner. So the student is not yet aware that this is a prize-winning piece of work. So this piece was from the session this year entitled Bradycardia. And I just love the richness of the art, but also the narrative just really takes us through that sense of the burden of medicine and the importance of just taking a breath and slowing down. And I love the it finishes, we are all glorious snails charging ahead slowly. And this is actually a piece of digital art, although we do provide the students with art materials. But what we've seen this year, because with our students' school-issued iPads, this year they also all have the Apple Pencil, and that's really opened up the potential for digital art. So we saw a higher percentage of students submitting digital art this year. Okay, just moving on to the second session. This is a session. Actually, I've been teaching with this film probably for now, if I look back, more than 18 years, I think, and I make a point of watching it every time. It's a film that many people may be familiar with, particularly those working in a palliative care setting. In its simplest form, it's watch a film and discuss it. As the lead for communication, the other thing I bring together the communication facilitators with this, and we invite the facilitators to work with the students. But actually, the humanities side of it, bringing it into the humanities program allows us to really think about the underlying theory and the impact of breaking the fourth wall. In terms of this was a play where the patient really does directly address the audience. What impact does that have on the students? And also the role of the poetry. So the poetry is not by chance that the patient in this film is an English professor who studies the poetry of John Donne. She takes us through back into some of just exploring her own life. I want to just play you a short clip from the film. Just to show that the role that the poetry has in this. Okay, I think I need to unshare and reshare to get the film.
Okay. Oh, yes. Your essay in Holy Sonnet 6, Miss Baring, is a melodrama with a veneer of scholarship unworthy of you, to say nothing of Donne. Do it again.
Oh,
Begin with the text, Miss Baring, not with a feeling. Death, be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. You've entirely missed the point of the poem, because I must say you've used an edition of the text that is inauthentically punctuated. In the Gardner edition of the text...
Well, that edition is checked out of the live, sorry.
You take this too lightly. This is metaphysical poetry, not the modern novel. The standards of scholarship and critical reading which one would apply to any other text are simply insufficient. The effort must be total for the results to be meaningful. Do you think that the punctuation of the last line of this sonnet is merely an insignificant detail? The sonnet begins with a valiant struggle with death, calling on all the forces of intellect and drama to vanquish the enemy. But it is ultimately about overcoming the seemingly insuperable barriers separating life, death, and eternal life. In the edition you chose, this profoundly simple meaning is sacrificed to hysterical punctuation. And death, capital D, shall be no more, semicolon. Death, capital D, comma, Thou shalt die! Exclamation mark. If you're going for this sort of thing, I suggest you take up Shakespeare. Gardiner's edition of the Holy Sonnets returns to the Westmoreland manuscript source of 1610, not for sentimental reasons, I assure you, but because Helen Gardiner is a scholar. It reads, "And death shall be no more, comma. Death thou shalt die. Nothing but a breath, a comma, separates life from life everlasting." Very simple, really. With the original punctuation restored, death is no longer something to act out on a stage with exclamation marks. It is a comma, a pause. This way, the uncompromising way, one learns something from the poem, wouldn't you say? Life, death, soul, God, past, present. Not insuperable barriers, not semicolons, just a comma.
Life, death, I see. It's a metaphysical conceit, it's wit. I'll go back to the library about
It is not wit, Miss Baring, it is truth. The paper's not the point.
Isn't it?
Vivian, you're a bright young woman. Use your intelligence. Don't go back to the library. Go out. Enjoy yourself with friends,
I went outside. It was a warm day. There were students on the lawn talking about, well, nothing, laughing. Simple human truth. Uncompromising scholarly standards. They're connected. I just couldn't... I went back to the library. Anyway. All right. Significant contribution to knowledge. 8 cycles of chemotherapy. Give me the full dose. The full dose. Every time.
Yeah, so the what's become much more present in the conversation, the poetry, and this contrast between capital letters and exclamation marks and the comma, and what that says about her choice at the end of life, and what that means in terms of palliative care. For those who haven't seen the film, spoiler alert, she dies. What happens at the end is that
You're right, Tanya.
sorry, I was hearing background noise, not knowing where it was coming from, but my my browser had started playing another.
Sure.
Yeah, so this conversation about the comma versus the capital letters and apostrophes and the choice at end of life. So that's become quite an apparent thing. And she has a do not resuscitate order, which gets ignored at the end, and the students can then talk about this this contrast. So that's session 2. The third session, so the last session in year 1, sits within the musculoskeletal and skin block. And this allows us to explore issues of disability and disfigurement and physical appearance, and explore the patient experience, but also invite the students to reflect on themselves. Again, we explore a whole host of resources that highlight issues of self-image, disability, disfigurement, and stigma is a big theme that comes up. The final activity in this session actually invites them to reflect on themselves and is almost a gratitude practice to, even though all of us will have aspects of our appearance and our bodies that we may be not as comfortable with, when you've explored, disfigurement and disability, you start to kind of realise actually that we have a lot to be thankful for, and maybe the bits of our bodies that we don't like so much, we can still offer them a bit of love and feel grateful for them. So that's our third session in year 1. As we move into year 2, we are in blood and infection. Until a couple of years ago, we focused this session on the story of SARS and also the story of HIV in America, and almost comparing, contrasting, look at the kind of the issues of epidemiology, the concept of patient zero, and the relationship between infectious disease and society. When we first started this session, the students kind of connected with the SARS story. They could remember it from their childhood. As we worked through the year groups, that memory became more and more distant for our students, and it didn't resonate as well. The world has given us a whole host of new material to kind of look at the impact of infectious disease and the intersection with society and politics and things. A couple of years ago, you say to your average person, is there a relationship between politics and medicine? And maybe not many people would see it, but it's so present at the moment. So this session now focuses on COVID-19. We start at a global level, thinking about biopolitics and biopower. We move to a local level and explore the response to COVID-19 in Singapore. We have some lovely personal sharings from clinicians of their experiences. Dr. Veronica Ventura, who was supporting the migrant workers in the big box, talks about her experiences and kind of dispel some of the myths about actually what a lot of the public thought. There's lots of conversations around the migrant workers that were sent into hotels to isolate, and you heard narratives going on about, it must have been very comfortable and luxurious, but that was the setting where there was most struggle due to isolation and most difficulties faced. So that was one story. The other narrative we have was from Anita Lim, clinician at NUHS, who actually had a really strong interest in medical humanities and had joined us for a few sessions and had been inspired to write about her own experiences as a result of this, and writes about her experience in ICU. And actually in one of our sessions this year came back, and for most sessions we have a recording of her reading her paper or her piece, but she actually came and physically read it in class for one group. And then from the local level, we kind of move on to the impact on the individual, that, as human beings, all of us have been impacted in so many ways, and just exploring the societal impact, the impact of quarantine, the impact of social distancing and lack of travel, all those kind of things, and the link with the explosion of mental health. And this is one of the areas where I bring some mindful self-compassion into the program to share practices with the students to kind of reflect on themselves. It's not just their patients who have suffered, it's them as individuals. that is navigating the world, the concept of a future career in healthcare, the constantly changing guidelines in how we can deliver teaching, and the struggle that comes with that. Our creative activity in this session is to design in groups a public awareness campaign, and they make posters and they identify a particular target group and a particular message. So, for example, some groups chose, how do you encourage, I think at the time we ran this, it was just starting to offer vaccination for children. And how can you create posters that would help children feel comfortable, or to encourage parents to come forward and have their children vaccinated. So that's the first session in year 1 and year 2. The second session in year 2, we look at narrative medicine, and this sense of the role that writing has, patients who write, caregivers who write, doctors who write, and not just who are they writing for, but why do they write? The writing is sometimes to inform an audience or to share a story, but often it can also be writing as a way of attending to self-care as well. We contrast fact and fiction, different narratives. We have poetry. There's a play as well. We actually get we see a video of one act of a play, gets some students to act out the next act and kind of critique that. Allows us to analyse medical error and the feelings that may come up as a result of that. So again, there's this sense of professional identity formation coming through. And the piece of work that comes out of that, and this is the year 2 piece of coursework that is part of the in-course assessment, we just call it Write Something. And again, this is the last hour of the session is put aside for this, but they have a week after the session to submit if they want to take more time. So there's this choice again against getting it done within the confines of the session and not having it burden you as coursework later, or the option to put a bit more time into it if it's something that they really want to, and having an extra week to submit. And this is the session that actually we're running the session tomorrow. I just want to share with you a couple of examples of, so we get quite a lot of poetry, and these kind of poems, this is quite common when you sort of, some of you get the poems that you can read in different ways. So the 3 poems in one. And again, there's this sense of managing emotions coming through as a really recurrent theme in the work that we see. We see, this was one from last year, and again the COVID-19 theme coming through, that this poem really sort of speaks of the stigma that was felt by healthcare workers at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the fear that the public had. You see somebody with a healthcare uniform on the MRT and not want to sit next to them. This was one of the themes. This piece of work I want to also share with you. I love this piece of work. This was actually a rewrite of a song. I'm going to try and play you the actual piece. So one student rewrote the song "Driver's License" by Olivia Rodrigo. I'm just going to play this. This file has been moved. Okay, let me just try. Okay, maybe I'll skip that and come back to it if I have time at the end. It's decided it can't be found. The final session in year 3 is in aging and family medicine, and we kind of look at end of life again. We focus on this theme, that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's quote, you have to take a good hard look at your own attitude towards death and dying before we can sit quietly and without anxiety next to a terminally ill patient. And we have a whole number of resources, the local film Paper House, there's YouTube clips, there's stories from Rosalie Shaw, who came to Singapore to help set up Dover Park Hospice and Healthcare Association so sort of getting palliative care going in Singapore, and contrast that with the history of death and dying in Singapore and the death houses, Sago Lane. So the students kind of explore that history and think about how the shift in attitudes to death and dying have happened or started to happen. We want to encourage the conversation around that. And there's 2 things that we do in this session that really allow us to do that. Firstly, we have a whole host of images. This is just a small selection. When we can teach face-to-face, we actually just have these scattered around the classroom, and students will go and just pick one that speaks to them and then find a partner, and in turns just express to that partner, why did I choose this image? What does this image say to me about my relationship with death and dying? And then we have another activity, which is conversations, where students in groups of 3 will explore some questions that invite them to express themselves. It's not a conversation that people have easily, talking about end of life and death. But of course, as clinicians, they need to acknowledge that they will be experiencing death at some point. So to become comfortable talking about it, it starts within. And within these conversations, we encourage them to really, I say to them, everything I've taught you in the communication teaching, that about active listening, times that by 100. This is compassionate curiosity. This is just mindful presence. When one of you is sharing, the other one, the other 2 are just listening and being totally there, holding that space. So these questions, we have, this is just a few of them. There's a card pack with maybe 15 questions, and they maybe have an hour just to go through those and share. No obligation to answer any particular question. There's choice to not answer or to skip a question, to be respectful for those that are less comfortable sharing, or topics that might be difficult to talk about. So that's the 6th session. Every one of the sessions finishes with these questions. Just asking them, have they thought about something in a different way? Have they found something enjoyable or interesting? The 3rd one is the key one. So in terms of overcoming those barriers to medical humanities as a discipline, how is this going to make me a better doctor? If they don't have an answer to that question, or we become aware that a particular activity is not giving them an answer to that question, then that's something that it may be not as valuable to them. So everything that we do needs to be valued by the students. So we want them to think that what we're delivering, the experiences we're giving them will help them. And just to share a little bit of feedback that we've had from some of the sessions. A little bit wordy here. So reminding me of the reason I chose to study medicine. Thank you for being open and hearing our interpretation of the different works. I think one of the nice things is that they have a sense that there's no wrong answer. And that's something they're not used to. They do so many single best answers. To have a session where there's no wrong answer is kind of refreshing. And I like this last comment. I'm beginning to find medical humanities one of the reasons I feel so blessed to be in LKC. So that's quite nice. Triumphs and bonuses, we mostly get positive feedback. Of course, with us engaging every single student, there are a few who maybe it's a little bit harder to reach them. There's always going to be the students that sort of think, I could be using this time to learn more anatomy. But I think generally the intentional nature of making it spacious, making it enjoyable, giving them the opportunity to do something different means the feedback we get is mostly good and does give them an opportunity to think about things in new ways. Benefits beyond the learning, so space to express themselves, development of self-care strategies, and that's become a deliberate theme as well, bringing some mindfulness and some self-compassion into the teaching. We've also identified some student wellbeing issues. So in the activity where they write, some of them write about their own experiences, and sometimes when I read, it's like, okay, this sounds like you're speaking from your own experience, and maybe we've had the opportunity to reach out and offer help where help is needed. There's students who are experiencing burnout or struggling with mental health problems or other forms of distress or learning needs. And we've also actually identified professionalism and attitudinal concerns as well. Students that really are, I think someone asked the question earlier, does anyone ever get angry? Where we see a lot of resistance to this, the inability to see the heart as anything but a pump actually was the first indication of somebody who then found it really difficult to connect with patients. So that's quite helpful. We have our art. Our artwork is displayed. So our white coat ceremony, we have some of the artwork displayed on screens as the audience are coming in. And actually we also select one of the poems to be read at the white coat ceremony as well. We're exploring a collaboration with a student group, actually with junior college students as well as our own students, to have artwork displayed around clinical settings. And also we saw mention earlier of the SHBC conference. Our students often submit work to this conference. Where we want to go from here on in is into the clinical years. There's not much yet in the clinical years. It's lovely when we just see little examples. For example, there's a lovely kind of picture reflection activity within the palliative care block. And I think that's thanks to Aranang, who created that. We'd like to see our students doing our year 4 scholarly projects in humanities. And new opportunity for our students coming up soon is the ability to apply, for a small number of students to apply to do an intercalated BSc and add a 6th year into the programme, sort of in the middle. And some students may have the opportunity to go to Imperial and take part in Giskin's Giskin Days Medical Humanities programme there. So just to say thank you, the names that I've mentioned, Giskin, Harry and Michael, this programme would not be what it is without them. So thank you. If it's okay, do I have time to play that song for you?
Yes, please go ahead. So some of I
flicked through some students' work, but this one I got specific permission to share from the students. So this is Doctor's License, which was a rewrite of Olivia Rodrigo's driver's license. Oh, hang on. Where's that? I'll just share. You hear that?
No, not really.
Hang on, let me share this. Share with sound, and you can hear. Really doesn't want to play. That's shared. Okay. Right, I'm going to give up on that. It doesn't want to play once my screen is shared for some reason.
Thanks, Tanya. Thanks for sharing. I think it was a very comprehensive program that you have running in LKC, and it really gives us an idea about what such a program will look like in the medical school setting. May I ask the rest if you have any questions, comments?
Hi. Enkun, do you mind if I ask a question?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Tanya, sorry, I missed a little bit about from the start. There was a point you made earlier about an indicator of how well patients interact. How well students interact with patients later on. I missed that part. What was an indicator?
Okay, so I was explaining that actually one of the additional benefits we've had is allowing us to pick up students in difficulty. So in their writing and in the piece of heart art they submit, we ask them to really what we grade it on is the ability for them to show they've thought about something in a humanistic way. Whether that be the patient story, whether that be their own professional identity formation. Then we had a situation where, with a student who was really struggling to see the heart as anything more than a physical pump. And this then was more than just a difficulty in this one piece of coursework. It was the first indicator of someone that struggled with seeing the humanistic side of medicine, seeing the need to connect with patients as people, and seeing the need of, seeing that medicine is more than just about seeing a problem and fixing it. So as well as being able to support students in developing this way of thinking, it also allowed us to identify students that really struggled with it.
Thank you. May I ask a follow-up question? Mm-hmm. When you say you ask them to give feedback and you assess their pictures or write-ups, was there a framework that you used?
So the mark scheme is it's simply satisfactory or unsatisfactory. So it's a pass-fail. With the piece of artwork we ask them to submit around the heart, there needs to be a piece of art, there needs to be a narrative. The narrative needs to demonstrate that they have thought about what does the heart mean to us as human beings, what does it mean to their patient, and with the piece of writing, it can be anything. It can be a piece of poetry, it can be a story, it can be fact, it can be fiction, it can be a cartoon, it can be graphic medicine. So we just want them we're looking for evidence of thought, and for them to have created something.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Anyone else has any other questions or comments?
Hi, Inkun, can I
Hi. Yes.
Hi, Tanya, Raveen here from Pediatrics at KK. Thank you so much for your talk. I think I'm extremely jealous of the LKC students. I wish I had that when I was in medical school. I feel like applying for that intercalated BSc myself. In fact, it's something I wanted to ask was what Lilith had mentioned, the heart art. I know we've tried to run a couple of medical humanities sessions here. And again, I think we'll probably talk about this later. Usually the fact that there's only 28 of us here means the interested people keep on coming back. So but that's a good start. But for your heart art thing, I find that sometimes when some of our sessions, when we ask them to share a piece of artwork or poetry or narrative, it's anonymized. And I think you really get a blow-to-blow honest account. I mean, obviously, yours is not an elective. It's a compulsory part of your curriculum. And for this exact example you gave, right? This person who only looked at the heart as a pump and nothing else. Again, I will give all the students the benefit of doubt that they are going to be honest with the coursework. And for those who feel burnt out, stressed, suicidal, I mean, hopefully it will come out in these avenues and you can pick them up. But I'm just playing devil's advocate, right? If they find out, oh gosh, I'm being watched by this, and if I really write or express how I really feel, Tanya's going to call me up and ask me for a cup of coffee or have a chat session. So I will not really be totally honest, but I will say what I think they want to hear. And again, I'm not sure whether I'm getting my query across correctly, but it's the how to reconcile them being honest versus being called up for their supposed unprofessional thoughts or attitudes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of anonymity, I mean, we never display any students' work publicly without their permission. And so they can put what they want and know that it's not going to go more widely on show than just those of us that are marking it without them being asked. The piece of written work they can do, they can write factually or they can write fictional. So when I have read pieces in the past and kind of thought, oh my gosh, that there's something worrying in here, I always need to consider the possibility, is this a fictional piece of work? And when that happens, and when I have been worried, the email I write is, we did give you the choice of writing fact or fiction, but there's something about the authenticity in the way that you write that says either you are an amazing, amazing writer or you're speaking from your own experiences. And, we really want to help. So, for those students we have kind of connected with in that way, often that invitation to come have a cup of coffee with me, I hope I'm not that scary. So, usually that's a helpful thing that's come out of it. And not something that is going to cause them more distress. And I've had other students, I've had students where I've, reached out and said, I'm really worried about, they're talking about mental health. And the students replied and said, yes, this was me a few years ago. I've worked through it. I've sought counselling, and now I'm volunteering as a peer helper within the student wellbeing services. But thank you for kind of making, kind of sort of checking in. So I've not had a negative experience of actually reaching out to a student in this way. But we're also really mindful of confidentiality, that we never, the heart art, for example, we ask, can we display it or not? They can say no, they can say yes, and we'll put my name on it, or they can say yes, you can display it, but please don't put my name on it. So some work is displayed anonymously as well.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all the questions and answers. It's 2 p.m. I would just like to acknowledge the comments in the chat group. I think the presentation has really inspire us to really support this endeavor. And I think if you were to proceed to the clinical years in terms of the program, I am sure you'll be supported as well, as mentioned by Natalie as well as Peter. So thank you very much. Is there any last questions or comments from anyone?
I saw Harry's hand go up.
Yeah, may I?
Yes.
Right. Just very brief. Well, thank you, Tanya, for introducing all the exciting development at LKC. I mean, this is actually a question for not only you, but also people in general. That how do you think that the COVID-19 creates a barrier or an opportunity for the curriculum improvement, or even if you are trying to revamp all the curriculum, and if you see the sudden expansion of student numbers, how would people react then? Thank you.
Certainly, COVID has given us a whole host of new material to play with. I mean, and I think I think it's made the idea of medical humanities more accessible, because it's so apparent that medicine and politics have this close relationship that. It's created those opportunities. I don't know, what do others think?
Personally, I think COVID has brought issues that were previously hidden upfront into open, and I think in this day and age, people are actually a bit more vocal. So it's not surprising to see that burnt out staff actually are vocalizing their distress. One example will be how they actually reacted to the recent kind of announcement that our healthcare system is actually coping. This was said by the minister. But so you get the idea about how responses are actually a bit different now. So I do see a lot of opportunities to address some of these issues that come up. But I think we also want to be a bit mindful as well, because we don't want to be seen as the hero to the rescue with the cure kind of method to solve all the problems of the pandemic. At the end of the day, I think there's going to need a lot of coordination, as well as understanding about what we can provide before we can really start anything.